So these are the two most stupid economic ideas I could think of. Now, get some popcorn and well, my only hope is that you finish this video with your brain fully vaccinated against these economic abominations, okay? So, our first masterpiece of economic ignorance is taxing rich people or taxing billionaires. That's been kind of trendy, right? Now, let me tell you, if you are one of the morons who support this idea, you got it all wrong, okay? Now, let's dissect this idea. First, where has it been gaining traction? In countries that are already drowning in debt, desperate to balance their budgets, and that already tax their population to death. So that's where this idea has been gaining traction lately. So what happens here is that the government, as always, short on cash, right? Because it can never live within its means. So what happens here is that the government shows up and says, it's the rich, they are the problem. We need to tax them so we can make things work. And of course, most people, already exhausted from being taxed and resentful to the core about their own existence, of course most people hear this and say, it's true, we need to tax the rich. They are the reason things are not going right. It's because they are not suffocated by taxes like us. So this is usually the context for this economic measure of taxing the rich. Now, what I find interesting here is that barely anyone stands up and says, no, that's a stupid idea. Raising taxes or creating a new tax is not the solution. The rich are not the problem. The problem is the government that is wasting our money and keeps asking for more. Instead of raising taxes, let's all pay less taxes and cut government spending. What a brilliant solution, right? After all, the government is not using our money efficiently. Now, unfortunately, almost no one says that. Few have that kind of insight, you know? And my guess is that, honestly, that happens because first, most people are completely ignorant about how the economy works. However, this economic measure of taxing the rich is also largely driven by resentment. You see, a lot of times, people are actually not that interested in things getting better, you know? Sometimes, people just want to see those who are doing better suffer just like them. It's envy that drives the world, right? In any case, why is taxing the rich a stupid idea? And here let me add this. Taxing the rich, besides being stupid, is actually a very arrogant proposal, and I will soon explain why. But taxing the rich is a bad idea because, guess what? It simply doesn't work. It obviously doesn't work, man. Listen, if there's one thing rich people are good at, it's handling money, right? If they were not good at dealing with money, they probably wouldn't be rich in the first place. Makes sense, doesn't it? So, what makes you think they will just sit there and let themselves be taxed? What makes you think they will act like sitting ducks waiting to be shot? And what makes you think they won't just pack their bags and move somewhere that won't tax them? So that's why this economic idea exposes the arrogance of those who propose it. Because whoever comes up with it basically assumes that others are dumb, right? That rich people are dumb. So, taxing the rich is our first stupid economic idea because it obviously doesn't work. Because the moment that tax kicks in, most of the people it targets will have already left, taking all their capital, all their investments with them. And that's the result of taxing the rich. Capital flight. So, in the end, you don't really manage to raise any extra money, but on the other hand, you end up driving away investments and sources of funding, making everyone's life even harder. So, congratulations, very effective. Now, our second disastrous economic idea is price controls. That's another very dumb idea, and it can only be proposed by someone who doesn't have any notion of economics, who doesn't understand anything about it, or by someone with bad intentions. Seriously. So what happens here? When does this idea start to gain traction? In what situations? On what occasions? Well, this idea starts to circulate when inflation kicks in. So inflation starts to increase, everyone gets mad, right? And of course, the state appears with a brilliant idea: to control prices. And obviously, most people support this idea. After all, no one likes prices going up, right? The problem is that price is the most important piece of information in the economy, so if you suppress it, you mess up the entire production chain. Price automatically and naturally signals whether a product is more or less in demand in a certain place. For example, if more meat is being demanded in New York, the price of meat will naturally go up, right? Attracting more meat sellers who will supply the market. And if a larger amount of meat arrives in New York, this will push the price of meat down, right? On the other hand, if the price of meat were prevented from rising, you simply wouldn't have this restocking taking place. Because if the price stayed the same, the sellers of meat wouldn't be attracted to sell there. So remember this. Price is the most important piece of information in an economy, and you cannot suppress it. You see, if you start suppressing prices, if you start controlling prices, what you will end up creating is a shortage of products. And as a result, you will cause the prices of those very products you wanted to control to skyrocket. Now, let me explain that. Let's imagine that you produce apple juice, okay? Now, the government has set a rule that the price of apple juice cannot go up anymore. It has to stay the same. Well, normally, you sell your apple juice for $10, and your cost to produce it is, let's say, $8, okay? So that means you have a 20% margin. But prices are going up, and they are going up for you too. So let's say that in the following month, your cost to produce your usual apple juice rises to $9. And let's remember that you are forbidden to raise your price. However, since you are still making some money, you keep producing your apple juice, right? Now, let's say the situation changes the next month. So instead of $9, your cost to produce your apple juice has gone up to $10, and you still cannot raise your price. So, what do you do now, right? Should you keep producing your apple juice because you are not making any profit anymore? But let's say you keep producing it to preserve your brand, okay? However, the next month, your cost to produce your apple juice rises to $11. Now, you are operating at a loss. So, is it worth continuing to produce your apple juice? Well, certainly not, right? After all, you work to make money, not to lose it. So you simply stop producing. And just like you, all the other apple juice producers decide to stop production as well. So just like that, the apple juice that everyone loves simply disappears from the market. The shelves get totally empty, and the only place you can buy apple juice now is on the black market. And since apple juice has become an extremely rare product, guess what happened to its price? It simply skyrocketed, and now you can only buy a bottle of apple juice for $30. And that's the result of any price control policy. In the end, the shelves get empty because the incentives for products to be made and sold simply disappear. And if you manage to get your hands on any product on the black market, its price will have exploded. So that was our second disastrous economic idea for today. Now, as an extra, I would also like to include printing money as a third totally stupid idea on this list. And the reason for that is pretty obvious, right? Because when you start printing money, you simply destroy the purchasing power of your currency. But as for that, I'm already tired of talking about it on this channel. Anyway, these were the two dumbest economic ideas I could think of: price controls and taxing billionaires. That's it for today, and see you next time.